The sun bled orange across the cracked earth of the Arizona Badlands, turning the iron rails into molten ribbons that snaked through the dust. Elias Kane stood on one side of the tracks, his duster flapping like a wounded crow in the evening wind. His hat brim cast a shadow over eyes that had seen too many sunsets and not enough mercy. Across from him, on the other side of the steel divide, stood Clara Whitlock, her prairie dress torn at the hem, the once fine calico now the color of desert clay. Their hands met in the middle, fingers locking with the desperation of two people who had nothing left but each other and the promise of a train that might never come. Elias had found her 3 days ago, half buried in the wreckage of the stagecoach that was supposed to take her to California. The Apache raid had come fast, arrows whistling like hornets, horses screaming, the driver's body pinned to his seat by a lance. Clara had been the only survivor, dragged from the overturned coach by Elias as he rode patrol for the railroad. He'd meant to take her to the nearest fort, but the fort was 50 miles north and the raiders were still circling. So they walked south instead, following the rails that the Southern Pacific was laying like a scar across the territory. "You shouldn't have come back for me," Clara said now, her voice raw from dust and grief. Her husband, dead these 6 hours, had been the reason she was on that stagecoach in the first place. A banker from Boston, soft-handed and softer-headed, who thought the West could be tamed with ledgers and law. The Apache had proved him wrong with a tomahawk to the skull. "Wasn't leavin' you for the buzzards," Elias replied. His thumb brushed the inside of her wrist, feeling the frantic flutter of her pulse. "Besides, you still owe me for the water." She laughed, a cracked sound that turned into a cough. He'd given her the last of his canteen 2 nights ago when fever from a shallow arrow graze had nearly taken her. She deliriously called him Samuel, then, her husband's name, and he'd let her, because names didn't matter out here. Only surviving did. The rails hummed beneath their boots. A vibration that grew into a growl. The 410 from Tucson, right on schedule despite the war parties and the heat that could boil a man's brains in his hat. Elias stepped back, pulling Clara with him as the locomotive rounded the bend, black smoke belching like the breath of some iron dragon. The engineer leaned out, whistle shrieking, and Elias raised his hand in the universal sign, "Stop. Passenger." The train slowed with a screech of brakes that sounded like a dying steer. Boxcars rattled past, their sides stenciled with Wells Fargo and Union Pacific in peeling paint. Clara's grip tightened on Elias's hand. This was the moment. Board the train, head east to civilization, leave the desert and its ghosts behind. But civilization meant questions. Meant explaining why a railroad scout was traveling with a widow whose husband lay rotting under a cairn of stones 50 miles back. Meant the hangman's rope if anyone decided Elias had been too slow to save the banker. The conductor hopped down, a wiry man with a mustache like a broom gone wrong. "Trouble?" he asked, eyeing Clara's torn dress and the blood dried on Elias's sleeve. "Stagecoach hit," Elias said. "She's the only one left." The conductor's gaze lingered on their joined hands. "Ticket. Don't have one. But I've got this." Elias reached into his duster and pulled out a folded sheet of paper, the railroad's own script, payment for scouting the route ahead of the cruise. Worth 2 passenger fares to Tucson, maybe more if the conductor was feeling generous. The man unfolded it, squinting in the dying light. "This'll do. But you ride in the caboose. No offense, ma'am, but you look like you've been through hell, and the passengers up front paid for comfort." Clara opened her mouth to protest, some remnant of Boston pride, but Elias squeezed her hand. The caboose was fine. The caboose had windows. The caboose meant they stayed together. They climbed aboard as the train lurched forward, the sudden motion sending Clara stumbling into Elias's chest. He caught her, one arm around her waist, and for a moment the world narrowed to the smell of coal smoke in her hair, the way her body fit against his like it had been carved for the space. Then the door slammed shut behind them, and the desert began to slide away. The caboose was a metal box on wheels, furnished with a pot-bellied stove, a scarred table, and 2 benches that served as beds. A lantern swung from the ceiling, casting shadows that danced like demons. Clara sank onto one bench, her legs giving out. Elias locked the door, then checked the Colt at his hip. Habit, even though the Apache were miles behind them now. "You hungry?" he asked. She shook her head. "Thirsty." He filled a tin cup from the water barrel bolted to the wall. She drank greedily, water spilling down her chin. When she lowered the cup, her eyes were on him, really on him, for the first time since he'd pulled her from the wreckage. You never told me your name, she said. Elias Kane. Elias. She tasted it like wine. I thought scouts had Indian names. Something fierce. Had one once. White men couldn't pronounce it, so they gave me Kane. Said I raised enough hell to earn it. A smile ghosted across her lips. And do you raise hell? Only when the railroad pays me to. He sat across from her, boots stretched out. The train rocked beneath them, a steady rhythm that lulled the ache in his bones. Your husband, he treat you right? The question hung between them like smoke. Clara looked out the window at the darkening desert. Samuel was proper. He opened doors and sent flowers on my birthday. But he never looked at me the way you do. And how's that? Like I'm the only thing keeping the world from ending. Elias felt something twist in his chest. He'd spent 10 years riding ahead of the Iron Horse, mapping routes through mountains that didn't want to be crossed, burying men who'd trusted him to keep them alive. He'd stopped believing in anything softer than gunpowder. But Clara with her cracked lips and her fierce eyes, was making him remember. Night fell hard outside the windows.